Hey guys, Nick Showman from Showtime Strength. Today what we're going to do is a deep dive into squat training. Alright, so this is going to be a great video tool for beginners. Alright, we're going to talk about using the conjugate method to drive your squat up. So in reference, this is going to apply to anybody wanting to add some pounds on the bar in their squat. But we're going to reference to a lot of things talking about competitive lifting, so competitive powerlifting, where the squat is the goal. The biggest squat is the goal. All right, so first off, let's talk about my favorite way to run 3-week waves. I really preferred, there's a few different ways. So what we'll do is split our waves into 3 weeks. All right, so this is like a traditional West Side template. 12 doubles week 1, 50% plus accommodating resistance. And we'll cover that too, how much accommodating resistance to use. 10 sets of 2, just add 5%. Then 8 sets of 2, again adding 5%. All right, so that would be the end of the 3-week wave. Here's another way that I really liked training. This is how we laid out my training when I squatted 900 and then 930 in a competition, so 50-pound squat PR. So week 1 was 5x5, same thing, 50%. Week 2, 8x3 at 55%. 8x2 at 60%. And again, this is, bar weight. So 50, 55, 60% bar weight plus your bands and your chains. So really we were around 70, 75, 80% in these waves. Sometimes in these 3-week waves, what I would do if I did this 3-week wave, so by the end of this 3-week wave, I might work up and do a couple bonus sets as long as technique stayed, and either do 2 singles or two more doubles, just heavier. So it might be something like, if this week was 500 pounds of bar weight plus blue-green band, so that was my sets. I might do a set for a double at 550, and then another set 600 plus the bands for a double, and then just move on. All right, so you're just constantly building these, and these percentages, there's a few things I want to say about these percentages. Those numbers don't change until you hit those numbers in competition. So if you're working out with your buddies and you hit a new PR in the gym, these numbers don't get adjusted because of that. They don't get adjusted so you go to the competition and prove that you have mastered that number. And I would even say, say you go to a meet and you squat 500, but it's hard as shit and you don't know if you'll ever get another 10 pounds. I would still pull your number back, all right, then base your training, instead of saying I'm a 500-pound squatter, maybe say, I'm going to base this next training cycle coming off this meet at 450, maybe 480, somewhere in there. Because you want to give yourself a chance to succeed. I think too many people get caught up in chasing the next numbers, and I know I was guilty of it as well. But what you're doing is you're leaving behind the progress that you've been building on. You're trying to jump steps, and in the game of weights, man, you're not going to get out injury-free trying to skip steps. All right, it's a long game, so the more you can play that way, the better it's going to be for your longevity, which is going to be better for your strength. All right, so another thing we do, we do this occasionally, just 1 to 3 weeks, 5 sets of 2. All right, and it wasn't, this wasn't as much percentage based, but it allowed us, we would rotate exercises more. We try out different things. These are pretty tough and really, I'd say more advanced. For most people, I really think you're going to do better here in one of these two formats. Like I said, even sometimes here on week 3, instead of 8x2, we push that up to 10 sets of 2 for some more volume. All right, let's talk about why, or actually we'll lay out some of the ways I prefer to do our dynamic squat waves. All right, so, and these are just examples of how you can organize them. I wasn't a big fan of everything, but safety bar. So I was a big fan of safety bar with chains, and I was also a big fan of safety bar, and these are all off a box, but safety bar box squat with bands. They both have a tremendous training effect. Buffalo bar and bands, squat bar and chains or bands. And then periodically what I'd do is I would run no briefs, or I'm sorry, not no briefs, but no box and no accommodating resistance. So just 3-week wave of squatting and briefs. So right there, you got camber bar, box squat with bands, safety bar with chains, safety bar with bands, buffalo bar with bands, squat bar with chains, squat bar with bands, and then just a free squat wave. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 21 weeks of squat training right there if you're running 3-week waves. So 7 different exercises, 3-week waves, 21 weeks. So you run through that 2 times in a year, you got 42 weeks of training. All right, so if you're doing any competition, peaking, pulling back, that's pretty much going to take up your whole year just with those variations. And again, those are just some of the ones I really enjoyed. I did not like camber bar box squatting with chains. I just didn't feel like it really transferred. Camber bar box squat with heavy bands, we would take the blue, green, purple band, wrap them around the plates at West Side, and that to me I think maybe made me stronger than any other squat variation. It would, you know, sprinkle all this in as you will, because it was also maybe the hardest thing to recover from. But right there, it shows you it doesn't have to be crazy complicated. You don't have to have reverse bands and, you know, bands pulling down and chains. How much band tension, how much chain weight. Don't get, these are going to be your meat and potatoes. Throw some straight weight in there every now and then, but a lot of times we're using some accommodating resistance, and that's the next thing we'll talk about. Accommodating resistance, use less, don't use more. All right, it's one of those things, more is not better. Use less and you will get a large training effect. So instead of asking somebody what percentage of band should I use for my squat training, what you need to think is, what is the goal? Why do you want to add bands to the bar? Why do you want to add chains to the bar? Right? There's times where I would only squat, you know, being around 1,000-pound squatter, I'd only use a green band because I wanted to feel more bar weight. There was other times we would go 2 blue bands and a green band because we wanted to slow the lift down so much and minimize the bar weight and just really emphasize straining longer than the competition lift is is going to take. So another thing, where are you at in your competition cycle? I don't like crazy heavy band tension right before a meet. As a training tool, I think it's absolutely incredible, but heavy bands will fuck your day up. If you're not careful with them, they will ruin your whole meet. And on top of it, when people start loading 300-400 pounds of band tension, or even more, I've seen more, you're losing so much bar weight, and the bands are creating a grounding effect that when you get down to the box, it's not even close to the same. So you might look at your squat and be like, well, that's 1,100 pounds at the top, but it's really not, right? Because you're only dealing with 700 at the bottom. So you got to think about that. You need to feel, as you get closer to the comp cycle, you need to feel some more weight and something that's more going to mimic what you'll be experiencing in that competition. So like I said, where are you at in your comp cycle? All right, what is the goal? What is the experience? If you're a completely new beginner, squatting with like a light purple band, even if you're a strong person, is going to have just so much carryover. There's no need to squat with a green band. There's no need to squat with a blue band. You can run 3-week waves as a complete novice, going 3 weeks of purple bands. And this is somebody who's strong, not, somebody that's strong and just got into lifting in a powerlifting fashion. 3 weeks of purple bands, 3 weeks of green bands, 3 weeks of blue bands. I probably wouldn't run them back to back to back, but just to give you an example, because it's going to be a different training stimulus, it's going to be a different loading mechanism. So that's accommodating resistance, and chains are the same way. Chains actually have a sway. So we talked about grounding being bad. Chains, the more you have on, they're gonna sway coming up, because they're not all breaking the ground, but some of them are gonna break the ground. So that's something to be, again, as you get closer to a competition, you just need to feel some weight. So now let's talk about common issues in the squat. All right, and so we'll look at the descent first. All right. All right, and these are, I'm just gonna do like 3 for the descent, 3 for the concentric, and then we'll do 3 before you even pick the bar. So these are gonna be a little bit out of order. All right, and again, so these are just 3 for each of these positions. You can obviously, with the help of a good coach, you can obviously pick up more of these little things, but these 3 of each, I would say, are the most common, and we see them all the time. All right, so we'll start literally from the ground up before you even pick the bar. Look at your feet, and this helps when you have, again, when you have good coaches, or if you're trained by yourself, film yourself from different angles. So film yourself from the side, film yourself from straight on, film yourself from behind. What do your feet look like? Is one foot externally rotated more than the other? Is one foot ahead of the other? For me, it was easy because I was squatting as wide as the monolift. So if one foot's almost touching the monolift and the other one's not, all right, something's gonna feel really off when I break my hips back. All right, so make sure your feet are even. Make sure your hands are even on the squat bar. Again, I took my hands all the way out, so it really didn't matter. But if you got one hand out and then one hand back here, your displacement of that load on your spine is gonna make it feel so much heavier, because there's no way you're gonna pick it straight up, and it's probably gonna increase the chances of you having some rotation either in the eccentric or the concentric movement. So again, adding rotation into the mix, it's literally like adding a 45-pound plate on one side. Head placement. So what I always told people, push your head back, so back, and look out. So I don't like the looking up, because then you just end up in this position, and that just strains the neck and actually loosens your upper back. Whereas this, that's locking in. So everything's locked in. You're taking away that open space between your neck and the bar, and your eyes are fixed. So even, you know, when I competed at the Arnold Expo, there's so many people around, you just have to find literally dots, and just don't lose focus with those dots the entire time during your competitive lift. All right, so the body's gonna follow wherever the head goes. That is 100% true on every lift. Now let's talk about the descent. So when we talk about the descent, that's the actual lowering part of the squat. All right, first thing, you'd be amazed at how many people you see their first movement is this. All right, so just that movement is pitching the bar out of line with your hips and putting it further over your knees. All right, so what we want is this movement. All right, we do not want this chest to drop. So think from my collarbone, all right, there should be, imagine a string pulling up. And once I start my descent, that string, or this line, should be going straight up and down. All right, so as soon as it's here, all right, you're gonna lose all tightness, and it's just so much harder. But a lot of times when people think hips back, what they don't realize is they're not really going hips back, they're just going into like a low back extension and just losing the strongest position for their lift. All right, another one is hips back too far. All right, you do have, especially the multiply lifters, you gotta sit the hips back. I am a big believer in that. All right, you can't sit down knees first. You have to break the hips back, load the glutes, load the hamstrings. The problem is, if your hamstrings can't handle the load placed upon them, they're gonna lose tension. If you lose tension, you're gonna lose balance. If you lose balance, you lose strength. All right, so, and everyone's gonna be different, and how far your hips break back is gonna be dependent on how wide your squat stance is, how tall the lifter is. But you can watch it. You can watch when people do this, when they sit back too far, because they might get down there and not even move. They might just be stuck in that position. Another one, elbows. So your elbows should be directly under the bar. That's why you'll see bigger guys, they'll have trouble keeping their elbows in, so they'll move their hands out, all right? Because if not, then they'll be in here and they're already pitched like this. But if you start here, that's shoving the bar, again, forward. You know, shoving your neck forward, and it's gonna want to shove that weight more over your knees instead of staying in line with your hips. So now let's talk about the concentric. So you're down in the hole and you start your movement up, just the same as the eccentric, the descent. All right, the collarbone has to stay up. The chest cannot drop. If the chest drops coming out of the hole, all right, now I'm putting everything onto my quads and my low back. All right, and that's not what we're trying to squat with. We want to squat with the glutes, hamstrings. All right, so to help with this, I think a lot of people think of like leg pressing up out of the bottom. Instead of thinking about leg pressing, think about if you're in a Smith machine and your feet are out, you know, in front of you, and all you have to do is push back into the bar to get it to move up. All right, it's the same thing. So drive your upper back into the bar and then just shove your knees out to the side. And what it's gonna do is create a wedge. Again, whereas if I go here, you can see just pushing straight up through my legs is pitching me forward a little bit. So that's not gonna be nearly as good. I know there's been some, I hate saying controversy over the knees out thing, especially in high level lifters. You don't see the knees coming in, all right? Drive the knees out. I can tell you from my personal experience, driving knees out has made some squats feel significantly easier because, again, you're creating a better wedge during that concentric movement, which is helping you use your glutes. All right, so now let's look at some exercises to help fix those. All right, so the chest falling, and I should. There's a big thing. Stand up. If you want a good squat, you have to stand up all the way and bring your hips into extension, all right, or else nothing's ever going to be loaded properly. So by shortchanging your pick, so when you pick the bar up out of the rack, you're really screwing yourself over. So you don't want to half-ass your pick. Stand up with all you got, squeeze your glutes. As you're standing up, flare the knees out, pull the chest up. All right, that alone, I mean, that's a huge one. And I see it in beginners, I see it in experienced lifters, everything. So that is one that is huge. So if your chest is falling, rows, add some isos to increase the time under tension. Safety bar squat, again, straight, rotate in, straight weight, bands or chains. Exercise that really helped me with keeping my chest position was a closed stance box squat with a safety bar, like a 10 to 12 inch box, conventional deadlift stance. All right, and using the safety bar with no handles, so your hands are like this. That lift will teach you how to keep that chest position, and if not, then you're just probably going to keep rounding your back and make the problem worse. Bottom up or pin squats are a good one because it's just focused on that movement. Elbows, so if the elbows are having trouble, that means there's something either in your external rotators or your lats. So some lat pulls, pull-ups, again, rows, and abs, just any ab exercise, because what you want to do is think, all right, I'm pulling here. So I'm pulling down, I'm pulling my elbow down and into my obliques, and it's just gonna help create a better relationship during that movement. So chest falls, knees out. So, and again, a lot of these are related. All right, a lot of people don't think about training their upper back to have a bigger squat. Something I think that helps a ton, and this is also part of the reason why I like box squatting, is hip mobility, because if you're always box squatting an inch below parallel, then you can go 2 inches below parallel. Now you go 3 inches below parallel, just as a training tool, just to increase the hip mobility. Don't be afraid to throw some stretches in there, because your squat's always going to be restricted until you have optimal hip mobility. All right, that's all for today. We're going to do another one on the squat, some more accessories. If you guys have any questions, please leave them below, or feel free to email me, nick@showtimestrength.com.